Okay, great. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. We're very pleased to have the opportunity to address you today on the topic of Cloudpath solution selling. So we have a special solution selling customer-facing presentation which we prepared and has been out in the partner portal for some time now. We thought it was about time to do a walkthrough for you as we've done for the internal sales teams. In fact, there are 3 versions of that. There's one that's a kind of a general enterprise version, and then there are also versions for higher education and primary education, which, as you probably know, are 2 very important vertical industries for Cloudpath Enrollment System, our platform for secure network access around BYOD and guest users. So today's partner webinar, we are going to do a walkthrough of the solution selling presentation. Just so this is basically a presentation that's going to be appropriate for our first customer meeting when you're just kind of getting a sense of whether the customer has challenges in this area and whether they might be a good prospect for this particular product. So we're going to do a walkthrough of that presentation for you, kind of a demonstration, a role play, if you will, to demonstrate what it would be like to do that yourselves in front of customers, and then some deeper dive bonus content, which my counterpart, Abhi, is going to cover just after the solution selling piece. So there's a lot to cover, so why don't we just go ahead and get started. So yeah, we're going to start with introduction, solution selling presentation walkthrough, winning with Cloudpath. That's where we go deeper dive, followed by next steps in kind of a call to action of what you can do to explore further and to get a little bit more hands-on with the product and to see how you can leverage it in your selling efforts. So by way of introduction, I'm here with my product management counterpart. First, myself, I'm Vern Schur. I work in product marketing at Ruckus, and my specific area of emphasis is Cloudpath Enrollment System. And Abhi Maratz here is my product management counterpart. We work together very closely on this product. So I'll give Abhi the chance to say hello to the audience.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. Hope the session will be useful for you guys.
Okay, that's great. Well, you'll hear again from Abhi in just a little while, but there's much to cover, so let's just go ahead and dive in. So I'm going to step into the kind of the cloak of the role play here. Imagine that I'm, somebody in your position presenting to a customer, and then this will kind of demonstrate how you would use this presentation. So our topic today is making BYOD and guest network access secure. Specifically around the use cases of BYOD users and guest users. So we're talking about delivering secure network access for people who arrive in an environment, whether it's an enterprise environment or a school or a higher education institution, or it could be retail or a hospital, and they expect instant connectivity. We've pretty much been conditioned to expect that almost anywhere we go these days, but I think, and it just gets to be more and more so as time goes on. And not every end user is thinking so much about the security aspects of getting online quickly and easily is one thing, but the security aspects are another element that people aren't necessarily thinking about, but which are very important to IT professionals. So in order to explore this topic, we're going to start by sharing some feedback or some perspectives of customers and prospective customers that we encounter every day. One piece of feedback we hear about the notion of getting people online and connected to the network, BYOD and guest users, is that it results in IT spending too much time on network access trouble tickets. So when users try to get connected with their devices, they arrive at your front doorstep at your office with their BYOD devices, guest users arrive, we could be talking about tablets, personal laptops, phones, so on and so forth. People do arrive with this expectation of easy connectivity, and when that doesn't work so smoothly, for instance, in the case of typically we see default methods of network authentication and onboarding of MAC authentication or a conventional pre-shared key where everybody shares the same Wi-Fi password. That basically those default mechanisms have some pretty serious flaws in terms of creating a lot of help desk tickets because users, they aren't always very intuitive for users. An example of that is users, there may be multiple SSIDs within an environment. Users move throughout the environment, and there's a different Wi-Fi password. There's a different key required for each one of those SSIDs. Or, over time, for security reasons, that password can change. The PSK changes, and there's no way to really notify users of that, so they come in the next day, and they can't get connected, right? And so what happens is they file a help desk ticket as a result of that. And it results in a lot of headaches for IT, because they're on the receiving end of those help desk tickets. So we hear in a variety of different environments, especially those where guest users are common and where BYOD is supported by the organization, we hear it's very common for help desk tickets to be, for the help desk to be inundated by trouble tickets as a result of this. So one of the biggest headaches that we hear in terms of prospective customers who haven't deployed a system for automating this process of getting connected is that it creates a lot of headaches for IT. And the second challenge around secure access is the security part, and just the fact of user behavior, whether it's intentional or whether it's inadvertent, is that people do things with devices that puts themselves and their devices, data, and the network at risk. So people, you could have somebody trying to author or access your network who's not approved for access, for example, or you could have, if you don't have the ability to implement differentiated levels of access, you may have people who are not authorized to access particular network resources, accessing those resources. So the lack of an ability to, policy-based kind of differential levels of access is a pain point as well from a security perspective. And also, just the fact of people who connect devices, you think about BYOD and guest users, they're unmanaged devices. So IT obviously doesn't have control over those the way they would for an IT-owned device. And so there's more risk that needs to be managed with respect to possible malware that can spread in your environment. As a result of an unsecured device connecting to the network, or even a device that doesn't have a PIN code enabled. For instance, if you bring in a BYOD device and they're able to access sensitive network resources, but they don't even have a PIN code enabled, imagine what happens when that device gets lost or stolen. Pretty much the person who that device falls into their hands is going to have the keys to the kingdom at that point. So there are myriad security issues with the default methods of network onboarding and authentication that can really have the potential to create security havoc in IT environments. And the third part is just the challenges around secure access is just the frustration. It's kind of the flip side of the IT help desk problem. The flip side is that BYOD and guest users are frequently frustrated when they try to get on the network. Imagine that scenario that I was talking about a little while ago where you have multiple SSIDs in an environment, you have multiple devices, you move around the environment, each one has a different key, pre-shared key that you've got to type in. And a lot of times, if you're choosing your keys wisely, chances are they have special characters and capitals and numbers and everything else, and trying to type that in again, when you're disconnected or as you move around the environment, it's easy to make a mistake, right? And so as an end user, you become frustrated with that, and then arrow back to the help desk. So you've got frustrated users, you've got help desk person is upset because they can't focus on strategic priorities, and then you've also got security issues. These are all challenges that are inherent with the default methods of network onboarding and authentication in a BYOD or guest user scenario. So those are some of the challenges. Before we move on to imagine a better state of the world in which these challenges are solved, let's pause for a minute to consider some statistics related to network access and BYOD. A recent research study by a company called Crowd Research Partners found that 76% of organizations support employee BYOD. That comes as no surprise. BYOD is nothing new, and it's been around for quite a few years now, I think pretty widely adopted, but still only 75%. I'm actually kind of surprised the number's not a little bit higher than that. But maybe the reason is because at the same time, 30% of organizations cite security concerns as something that inhibits them from more fully supporting BYOD. I'm going to guess that 24% that do not support it, there's a pretty big overlap with the ones where security is a concern. So those are just some statistics that kind of provide a frame of reference and some context. And the third one here is that 40% of help desk tickets are password related, and that's a number from Gartner Group. And of course, not all of those are related to password issues related to Wi-Fi access, but I think that that's embedded in there. And obviously, issues of authentication and network access are top of mind for many organizations and cause a lot of havoc on the help desk. Okay, so having our little pause for some statistics, let's move back to imagine a better state of the world where the challenges that we discussed a moment ago are resolved, that they're solved for customers. Imagine a world where users help themselves, IT is able to focus on strategic priorities because they're not inundated by help desk tickets related to people wanting to get online. A lot of organizations, it really varies by vertical industry, but a lot of times in education environments, there's not really a specialized, for example, there's not really a specialized help desk function. A lot of times it's a generalist IT person who's dealing with these day-to-day network access issues, and they really don't have time to deal with those kinds of issues. So the ability to be freed up and to be able to focus on larger priorities and really contribute to the business success or the success in attaining the organizational mission on the part of IT is something that they really value. So in a better state of the world, IT is happy because they're able to focus on the things that really have an impact for the business, for the organization. Imagine also a world where users are happy because they onboard once and only once. They go through an easy self-service workflow and are able to get their devices online quickly and easily and securely. They may not be thinking about that part so much, but the fact that they're able to get online quickly and easily is very high value for them. And they never complain about network access again. So IT is happy, users are happy. What could be better? Well, to put the icing on the cake, imagine also a better state of the world where the network is more secure. Actually, users, data, devices, and the network are all more secure because powerful security measures have been brought to bear on the security challenges related to the default methods of network onboarding and authentication. So in this better state of the world, IT is happy, users are happy, and users' devices and the data are more secure than ever before. We've plugged the security holes that are inherent in those default methods referenced before. You may not be surprised to learn that we have a product that addresses these issues. It actually builds a bridge between that world where you have all these challenges around getting users online securely and that world where everybody's happy. Users and IT are happy and everybody's more secure. And that product is Cloudpath Enrollment System, and it's software or software as a service that delivers secure network access for any user in any device on any network. So we're talking about BYOD users, guest users, we're talking about laptops, tablets, phones, IP-enabled IoT devices even, and we're talking about any network. And the any network part is especially important because the platform is network agnostic and works with other people's wired and wireless infrastructure, very importantly. And that actually has that has some importance that we'll address later in the presentation also. So employee self-service is going to make happy users because on day one, employees or guest users come into the network and they access, whether they have, whatever kind of device they have, they access a self-service portal, which is entirely customizable in terms of the logo, in terms of the workflows, in terms of the background images, even down to the color of the buttons and the text and the terms and conditions. Everything you could possibly want to customize within the self-service portal is customizable. But more importantly, that user is able to help themselves and to onboard their device using, if they're an internal user, their regular Active Directory credentials, and then they download a certificate or a digital certificate onto the device that serves as the basis for network authentication from that point forward, in a process that is entirely transparent to the user, so seamless authentication, no more problems about becoming disconnected as they move around the environment. Doesn't matter if the password changes, that device is still connected until the certificate is revoked. So it's persistent on the device, trouble-free experience, connectivity experience for the user from that point forward. And for guest users, they're also able to go through their own workflow where they get credentials by SMS, or email, or even printed voucher, and we sponsor-initiated or sponsor-approved workflows as well as just entirely self-service workflows. But for guests, it's the same deal. On day one, they self-provision their devices for network access, and on day two, they authenticate seamlessly, so no trouble from that point forward. Happy users, happy IT is the theme here. And so let's talk a little bit about the security features, because the security element of the value provided by Cloudpath Enrollment System is actually co-equally important to the onboarding piece. So there are a variety of powerful security measures that help to make devices and users and data more secure in your environment and plug those security holes inherent in default methods like MAC authentication and conventional PSKs. The first one is encryption for data in transit over the air, so that data between the access point and the device is vulnerable unless it's encrypted. And we're able to encrypt the data using the strongest security protocol that's in broad usage today, which is WPA2. Of course, recently the Wi-Fi Alliance recently announced WPA3, which will be coming online in the future as well. But right now, WPA2 is the strongest available security protocol that's going to secure that data in transit over the air between the access point and the device. And also we have network authentication based upon digital certificates. So the presence of that certificate on the device is going to serve as the basis for network authentication. And it's a way to make sure that only approved users get access. And sometimes security is about keeping the people who aren't approved out as well. So the fact that you're able to only grant authentication and network access to those who belong on the network is also an important security feature. And users are only able to see what they should see. And what we mean by that is you're able to implement policies for network access on a very granular basis, down to the level of individual users and individual devices, so they're only able to access the network resources in keeping with their role in the organization. For example, in the case of a guest user, typically you're only going to want to grant them, they're only going to want to give them internet access, and they're happy with that. Sometimes security is about what you don't give people access to as well as what you do. So if you're, if you work in marketing or in the call center, you don't get access to the server that has confidential payroll data. But if you work in HR or payroll, then that would be appropriate. So you're able to grant differential levels of access based upon policies that are enforced through the network infrastructure, and you're able to define and manage those policies within the platform. And so you're also able to do an upfront posture check to ensure that devices are safe before they're allowed to connect. And this is very important because in the scenario where somebody's bringing an unmanaged device, a laptop into your environment, you don't want somebody connecting if they got active malware, for instance, on the device. You want to make sure that they have malware, anti-malware software installed, and that signatures are relatively up to date. Otherwise, you could really leave yourself vulnerable to people bringing malware into your environment in a way that can propagate within the environment. Obviously, that's going to undermine security. Also, the idea of somebody needs to have a PIN code enabled on their device, which if it's a tablet or a laptop, that's something I referenced a little bit earlier, because if that device is lost or stolen, you're going to want to make sure that somebody's not able to access network resources that user has been granted to, because the network doesn't know whose possession that device is in. So you definitely want to do a posture check on the front end to make sure basic security measures are in place. Another example is just to make sure the firewall is enabled on a laptop. That's pretty basic as well. And finally, one of the things that Cloudpath Enrollment System does as a security feature is that it allows you to increase your level of control and visibility over devices on the network. So you're able to see every device that's on the network, and you're able to revoke access at any time. For example, in a scenario where an employee with a BYOD device, quite unexpectedly becomes a former employee. You don't want that person out in the parking lot accessing, confidential networks resources over the Wi-Fi because that device still has network access. You want to be able to reach in there in a pinpoint fashion and revoke that access, revoke that certificate on that BYOD device. Now, with a conventional PSK, you can't do that because everybody's sharing the same, Wi-Fi password, right? So if you revoke that access when somebody leaves, you just revoked it for everybody. So you don't have the ability with that default method of reaching in with pinpoint accuracy and revoking access for that individual. So that increased IT visibility and control with the power to revoke access is also a very powerful security feature. So that's an overview of the two big value areas provided by Cloudpath Enrollment System. I want to finish by going over a couple of customer success stories. We have a customer in St. Augustine, Florida called Flagler Hospital, which obviously is a healthcare organization. You may be aware that St. Augustine actually promotes itself as the oldest city in America. It actually dates back in the continental North America. It actually dates back to the time of when Florida was a Spanish colony. And Flagler Hospital is a very technology-forward healthcare organization in St. Augustine, and they actually won an award at one time from an industry association as the most wired hospital. So it's a very technology-forward organization. They actually pioneered electronic medical records all the way back to 2005. And so it's very advanced technologically, and they are a customer of Cloudpath Enrollment System. And this quote from Rob Frawley, who's a network engineer, is very illustrative of the success that they have had. Cloudpath software made onboarding extremely easy while providing all the options necessary to meet our security requirements. This is a very powerful product. Well done. So this is a customer that appreciates both the onboarding element as well as the security element of the value provided by the software. And we're going to finish with just one more. And Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Worcester, Mass. is an institution of higher learning, as you probably inferred. It's a pretty good-sized institution with about 35 buildings and almost 6,000 students, nearly 500 faculty. They were early adopters of BYOD, so the onboarding element is very important to them. And here's a quote from Ben Higgins, who's a network engineer there. We also incidentally have a customer case study for this, which is out on the partner portal, which you can access. And their quote here is, Cloudpath Enrollment System allowed us to connect legitimate users with a few clicks and still maintain a high bar of security with EAP TLS certificates. So another satisfied customer of Cloudpath Enrollment System, and there are many more. And I'm going to go ahead and advance the slide. We're going to go into a new section here related to bonus content, a little bit deeper dive. You probably observed that, the content presented so far is more appropriate to a first customer meeting when you're just kind of getting a sense of whether the customer has a need for this category of product. So I did manage to step out of character once or twice during the presentation. I'm going to step, firmly out of the cloak of the role play here and pass the baton over to my counterpart, Abhi, who will continue with the presentation and a little bit more deeper dive, how to sell, how to win with Cloudpath content coming up. So thanks, and I'll hand it off now to Abhi. And I'm going to actually take a moment to see if I can pass control of the WebEx as well. So bear with me for a moment while I do that. That's cool.
Great. Thanks, Vern. So that was a great intro, and like Vern said, so the first part of this session or slide deck is something that you would use for the very first meeting with a customer to talk about Cloudpath and how that solution fits into the overall messaging of security and a Ruckus solution in general. Now, this section that we're talking about, which we call bonus content, this is basically to give you, our partners, a little more insight into the product and why we should be positioning it, how we should be positioning it, and some more interesting details about a few of the questions, if at all you may be asked. For example, competitive or even product segment differentiation and so on. So we'll cover some of that. And as usual, of course, if you have any questions, feel free to have it on the Q&A section here. Now, for those of you who didn't know, Cloudpath is actually an acquisition that Ruckus made in 2015. So it's been about 3 years since we've had the product, and we have significantly expanded the scope of the product. We've added a lot of features in the last few years, and we continue to do so while still maintaining the whole vendor neutrality. So you could take Cloudpath and go into any of our competitor accounts and deploy Cloudpath, which gives you the opportunity to get into an account and interop with any standards-based network out there. Now, Cloudpath is, like I said, it's been there for quite a few years even before the acquisition. So we have over 500 customers, really large customers. A majority of Ivy League schools use Cloudpath, and we estimate somewhere around 6 to 10 million end users using Cloudpath every single day. We have a lot of names, a lot of big names. In fact, some of the accounts that you see on this screen here go up to more than 500,000 devices. So very large deployments are something that Cloudpath is very used to. Next slide, please. Now, the other aspect that we want to talk about is, why we should care about Cloudpath. Why should we even be selling it? Now, there are a few reasons, of course, apart from the monetary aspects of it. There are a lot of strategic benefits that we get with Cloudpath. So the biggest one is, of course, the Trojan horse that I was talking about, which is if you have an account that you're trying to figure out how to get into, Cloudpath gives you the ability to get into that competitor-held account. It's very easy to sell Cloudpath. It's a software, and it's something that's not too invasive, and which gives us an entry into the account. Well, there is a significant amount of installs that Cloudpath has, which is non-Ruckus, so it's mostly competitor-held, and we've been able to successfully sell Cloudpath into those accounts. And of course, when you get in, you get the ability to land and expand, which is you get in with Cloudpath and you can sell Wi-Fi and switching and more. So you could really expand the footprint in installed base accounts once you get in. And one of the things we consistently see is the time that it takes to close a deal with Cloudpath is really, really short. We typically see a 1 to 4 month sales cycle for Cloudpath. And a lot of times the close of a deal happens within the same quarter. So that is something that's extremely useful when you're looking at getting an edge on a particular account. And in addition to that, when you have a greenfield account, you do want to sell a solution which has a greater perceived value. I mean, an individual product versus an entire end-to-end solution has a greater perceived value, and that elevates the discussion from speeds and feeds and talks more about the overall solution that we are positioning. Now, who are the target customers? Well, Cloudpath basically has customers in every single vertical, and it has customers from the smallest of device population to the largest. But there are specific target customers where Cloudpath would be most useful. And talking about verticals, of course, education, and more specifically primary and higher education, both have a tremendous potential with Cloudpath. Education is our largest vertical and continues to be our largest vertical. So that is a vertical that is extremely important for us. We have, like I mentioned before, we have a majority of Ivy League schools on Cloudpath, and a lot of large primary education school districts are also Cloudpath customers. In addition to that, we have enterprises which use Cloudpath, and these enterprises range from variety of verticals behind. So these could be corporate space enterprises, these could be federal type deployments, we have hospitality, and we also have hospitals as well. So there's a significant variety of enterprise deployments where Cloudpath is positioned. In addition to that, I would like to point out that when we talk about Cloudpath, it's mostly mid-market type of deployments. Cloudpath is not an ideal fit for an SMB type of customer, because the value of Cloudpath really improves or expands when we have more users on the network. If we have very few or handful of users on the network, the value of Cloudpath doesn't really shine. So we typically recommend targeting customers who are 100 or more users, which is where this would be ideal. Cloudpath can also be positioned whether you have an existing customer, so if they don't have a product or product set similar to Cloudpath, they can position your existing customer or even a new or greenfield customer, whether they're running Ruckus or not, or even if they have a competitor account, you could position Cloudpath. And of course, Cloudpath can be customizable for end users in any language, so there's no admin localization, but any end user experience can be customized. So you could position this to a variety of customers out there regionally speaking, especially for our friends in EU who are joining us today. So here's a quick example of how Cloudpath looks like. Now the intent of providing this video/demo is just for all of you on the call to know how a Cloudpath experience looks like and how easy it is. And again, this is just a single example of how Cloudpath onboarding looks like. Like Vern mentioned before, Cloudpath onboarding can be customized in several different ways. This is just one example of how a Cloudpath onboarding looks like.
It's not a screen share, so I think we're going to have technical difficulties in getting that to work. I'm really sorry.
Oh, that's all right. So the typical process of Cloudpath onboarding basically would be authenticating to an Active Directory, and once we authenticate to an Active Directory, it's basically getting on the network automatically without the end user having to do anything. And when we do share out the presentation, we will include the video as well, so you can use that even in your customer presentations. I would also like to point out here that in addition to this slide deck, partners also have access to a product, in-depth product slide deck as well, which also has this video embedded in it, and we also have an experience on an Android device as well for the users who are concerned about Android onboarding as well. So both of those are available in the product slide deck, which should be there on the partner portal. Now, one of the big questions that I get asked is, how does Cloudpath differentiate between a NAC or an EMM? Is it a NAC? Is it a EMM or MDM? So this is a slide that helps us address that issue. Now, before we get into this, there's a lot of RFPs out there where you typically see NAC mentioned. So one of the things is NAC is a term that's been used very loosely and very widely. So I just want to point out the differences between some of these. If you look at this line on the very top here, so on the left-hand side, you see more network-type functionalities like network encryption, you have user identity, you have device visibility, onboarding, provisioning, etc., which is more network-centric activities. And as you come to the right, you see more device-level functionalities like device network permissions, you have application provisioning, you have firmware management, and also doing remote wipe on the device itself. Now, most of the items on the right-hand side are typical MDM or EMM type functionalities, and when you see functions towards the left, you see more NAC or network type functionalities. So Cloudpath definitely has a more NAC functionalities. In addition to that, of course, we do network encryption as well, but outside of that, it has a very NAC type functionalities. One of the things that Cloudpath does not do is, while we still do most of the device posture check and remediation, we do it during onboarding. We don't do what we call as a permanent or non-dissolvable persistent check and remediation. So outside of those differences, Cloudpath provides a lot of NAC type functionalities, and there is a lot of RFPs that we see out there where it just mentions NAC, and we need to understand what exactly the customer is looking for. 9 times out of 10, they're typically looking for some onboarding and provisioning capabilities, which Cloudpath does a great job at. So in 9 out of 10 times, we've been able to successfully position and win with Cloudpath as a NAC. But again, like I said, it depends on what a customer means by NAC and understanding what functionalities they're looking at. A lot of our customers also do not like the persistent NAC because they are a battery hog or they consume a lot of CPU resources. They make the machine sluggish. So there are a lot of our customers who prefer doing the posture check and remediation during onboarding. And of course, the end users can be onboarded again if the posture check needs to happen, and our typical onboarding happens within 30 seconds or less. So a lot of our customers do an yearly onboarding to make sure the devices are healthy in the network. So that was just a quick slide to show the differences between some of the various product classes. Now, we want to talk a little bit about competitive as well. So just so you guys are armed before you get into a customer and the customer has conversations about that. Now, the typical competitor for a Cloudpath type of a product is classically, of course, Cisco and Aruba. We have Cisco's Identity Services Engine, and we have Aruba's ClearPath as well. Both of those products are who are also quite well known in the industry and who have been there for a while. Now, outside of that, we do have customers who don't have an equivalent product deployed but are still a target market. So think about customers who are using a PSK-based network or a MAC authentication network who do not have any policy-based assignment or who do not have the encryption that we would need over the air or even on the wired network. So basically, these are customers who are not secure, who don't have any policy-based access. So they're using default methods of access. There's also a different customer set, which you see in the bottom here, which is people who have the ability to stitch some of the open source components and come up with their own solutions. They could have used Bouncy Castle or FreeRadius or a bunch of other systems and who have developed their own systems to service them. Of course, these are very complex to deploy and manage, but there are customer classes who have that as well. Now, Cloudpath can help in both these situations because Cloudpath can, for customers who are using default methods and not using any security or policy, of course, we can elevate their network performance and security with Cloudpath. And even for customers who are using these complex methods, we could help them because Cloudpath's price point is extremely low, so we can easily elevate their game because it's extremely simple to deploy and manage, and also it comes with a very active support wherein we keep the product updated every few months to service new clients, new operating systems that come out of the market. Now, comparing to both Cisco and Aruba's components, we hear this consistently that their products, specifically ICE and ClearPath, are extremely complex to deploy and manage. ClearPath needs a professional services team to deploy this, and also the average time to absorb these products are significantly high. And this is something that's not we're saying, it's something that our customers who have migrated from Cisco and Aruba consistently tell this message to us. While they offer a good feature set, they also have this challenge of being extremely complex. And that's where Cloudpath wins, because we have extremely simple deployment. And in addition to being extremely simple, we also offer what is called as a white glove service, which makes it extremely easy to deploy, wherein few of our support folks remotely assist in deploying Cloudpath, and typically just takes a few hours to get up and running. Now, here's a table to kind of look at these in a little bit more detail. Now, one of the key things that you'll see here is while both Cisco's ICE and Aruba's ClearPass claim vendor agnostic access and also both wired and wireless access, there are a few areas where Cloudpath really helps. One is the deployment type itself. Cloudpath is the only product that is available on the market today in this product segment, which could be deployed as cloud-based or an on-premises VM or Hyper-V based. Cloud-based deployment is extremely popular with Cloudpath, and we have a significant customer base who are exclusively using cloud-based deployment. In addition to that, Cloudpath is also multi-tenant, so for partners on the call today who want to deploy Cloudpath in their data center and offer it as a service to their customers, they can easily do that with the multi-tenant version of Cloudpath. So again, another value-added service that our partners can deliver to their customers. And also, with respect to cost effectiveness, I have to mention that Cloudpath is the only product which does a user-based licensing through and through. We don't do device-based licensing at all, unlike our competitors who do device-based licensing, so or at least device-based licensing on some of the SKUs. So we're exclusively user-based licensing, so it's a big difference because we don't tax the customers if their users bring in more than one devices, which is a very common use case, especially in education and enterprise where users bring in 3, 4, 5 devices, and especially in dorm rooms today where an average student has somewhere upwards of 8, 9 devices or so. So it's a very common practice, and which is why, irrespective of the number of devices a user brings, we are still charge one user license for that particular user. Also, Cloudpath is very, very easy to deploy and manage. This is something that we hear consistently with our customer base. And while we don't offer every nitty-gritty feature in the product, our focus has been to provide a product that is extremely easy to deploy and manage, not just by us, but by our customers and our partners as well. And like I mentioned, in addition to that, we also offer a white glove service, which offers remote deployment assistance, and it's not bespoke like a professional services engagement is. So it's extremely easy service that we offer for our customers. So moving on to next steps, please do check out our partner portal page. We have this slide deck, and we'll also have that is the solution slide deck, and we'll also have the product slide deck on the partner portal. And do complete the online training module. There is and I'll let Vern go through some of the other details as well.
Oh, yeah, I would highly recommend that you go out to the partner portal where there's a link to that training module. It's basically some of the same content, but also additional content and even more detailed information about how to sell Cloudpath enrollment system. And there's also a certification module, which the test, I think, is if you do the training module, you'll find the test is pretty easy, and you'll have the the added confidence of just being sales certified on the product. There was also an on-demand webinar, or a webinar that was held on July 25th that talks about cloud ready specialization and selling cloud Wi-Fi with Cloudpath. You probably are aware that cloud Wi-Fi is the controller architecture that's cloud-based. So we have a promotion that's related to selling those two in tandem. So there's a wealth of information available if you want to take next steps. And I think we're pretty much ready to wrap up now and maybe address some questions. We've got quite a few questions that have come in actually. So maybe we can get started with some of those and just take it a little bit more informal here and see what we've got.
Sure. So first question, Abhi actually answered online, but I'll just say it again so people on the line can hear. What makes a certificate secure when the generation of the certificate is based on a user and password?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question because typically before issuing a certificate, we do typically do a AD-based username password check. And again, I want to point out that that's not the only method. A certificate can be issued on AD-based authentication, radius-based authentication. It could be even social media authentication. It could be one-time password that we can send it to their phone or email. So there's several ways in which we can authenticate, including a sponsorship-based access. But specifically to this question, the username password is used only during the initial authentication to validate the genuinity of that particular user before we issue a cert. All authentication subsequently will always happen using that certificate. And even though we are doing an AD check to make sure the user is genuine, the cert is actually attached to the machine, so it really cannot be exported or imported into a different machine. And we can also limit the number of certificates that we issue for a particular user. And in addition to that, we can also check whether a device is a part of the domain or not. So if the user is using this username password on a machine that's not part of the domain, we can assign that device, we can give access and assign that device a different cert which is attached to a different policy, which means they get access only to the internet or whatnot. So even though the same username password is used, the levels of access can be different depending on the type of device that the user is using it from.
Great. Next question. We have some users with older machines that have issues with certificate-based authentication with Zone Director, such as Windows Home. Am I correct in thinking that they will not be able to authenticate with Cloudpath and will have to use DPSK instead?
Actually, quite the contrary. In fact, compared to a Zone Director, Cloudpath supports a much wider operating systems, not just operating system types, but in even operating system versions. And one of the challenges with a controller functionality, be it Smart Zone or Zone Director, is that every new operating system that comes, the code base has to be upgraded. So you had to move from 3.5 to 5.0 or whatnot whenever a new operating system, a client operating system is released. And that makes it very challenging because you need to upgrade your access points and such. With Cloudpath, that's not the case because give or take every month or so, we send a new update package, and this update package gets applied on the system, and the system doesn't have to go through a reboot or install. So it's a very seamless install, and because we provide an update package every month or so, your network always supports the latest and greatest operating system, and in addition to, of course, supporting the very old operating systems out there.
We should probably take a moment and just, that was a very astute question, but some of the users or some of our audience may be not yet familiar with the concept of DPSK, which is Dynamic Pre-Shared Key. So do you want to talk about what that is and what's the use case for that relative to certificates?
Yeah, so DPSK, for those of you who don't know, is Dynamic Pre-Shared Key, which is basically providing a unique key, unique passphrase to every user to get access to the network. A certificate is a more advanced form of getting access to the network because there is, from a security angle, it has a lot more aspects that can be controlled, in addition to, of course, granular policy-based access on a per-device basis and so on. So we don't necessarily have to move users to DPSK. In fact, with certificates, we can address more devices. We would recommend using DPSK only for IoT type of devices, which do not support any TLS authentication. But for most of the devices, that is smart devices, smartphones, laptops, and such, certificates should be the ideal way to get connected onto the network.
Great. Next question. Ricardo says, just want to confirm that Cloudpath can provide WPA authentication and navigation for corporate and guest users in places like hospitals, hotels, and universities for guest users.
Correct. So we do have a lot of deployments which have WPA to both enterprise and PSK over Cloudpath. So you could offer certificates for students, staff, employees, and such. And you could offer DPSK or a simple MAC authentication or even a PSK or a voucher-based network, social media login, and several different methods for guests. Okay, and then another question, Cloudpath can enroll guest BYOD users of any kind on any device, right, such as iOS and Android? Correct.
Okay. Another one, can we present the Cloudpath for our customers like a NAC/MDM solution?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the generic answer to that would be yes, but I would definitely encourage you to have a conversation with your customer to understand what is the functionality of a NAC or MDM that they're looking at. Chances are, like I said, 9 times out of 10, they're basically looking at some onboarding and configuration functionality which Cloudpath supports. Cloudpath cannot control or do functions like remote wiping a device or changing the firmware of a device, but we can definitely do functions like check the version of the firmware of the device, and if you want to force the user to upgrade, we could do that, but the Cloudpath doesn't natively help in managing the firmware of a particular device. But of course, functionalities like onboarding, provisioning, that we do, and that is the primary function of Cloudpath.
Okay, one more, or actually a couple more questions. Do you have something in a roadmap related with Cloudpath running in Cloud Wi-Fi for South America?
Yeah, that's a good question. So right now we are doing a Cloudpath and Cloud sales bundle from a product integration standpoint. Today, Cloudpath and Cloud do work together. They do interop with each other. But we are looking at integrating the cloud version of Cloudpath or the hosted version of Cloudpath and Cloud Wi-Fi together. That is something that will come in the future, but today they do interop together, so you could purchase Cloudpath and Cloud Wi-Fi and be 100% cloud-based deployment.
Okay. Another question, is there a short 2 to 3 minute Cloudpath demo video available for business customers?
Yes, there is. So in fact, the video is there in this presentation, which we were not able to show because of a WebEx screen share. But when we send out the link to this particular presentation, it will have the demo video, and the presentation on the partner portal also has the video of the demo both on Android and macOS as well.
That's right. There are 4 customer presentations out there. The one that has the embedded onboarding, user experience onboarding video, both of them actually, is the one that's called Product Brief Customer Presentation.
Okay, a few more questions. Can you tell us more about how you'll support WPA3?
Yeah, so that's also another very important and good question. So WPA3 right now is something in the works, and when WPA3 goes mainstream and when we have access points and end-user devices supporting WPA3, Cloudpath will also support WPA3 at the same time. So we expect that to happen somewhere around Q1, Q2 timeframe of next year, and as soon as we have end-user devices supporting WPA3, Cloudpath will also support WPA3.
Do you have any important third-party product integrations with Cloudpath?
Yeah, that's also another very good question. So Cloudpath is a product which typically integrates with external components, and a few of the examples are we integrate with firewalls, like firewalls with the likes of Palo Alto and such, where we can integrate to provide user and device information to firewalls so that they can apply granular policies. We also integrate with web content filtering products like Lightspeed and iBoss and such, where we can provide SSL decryption capabilities in addition to, of course, providing user and device information. We also integrate with a lot of other third-party vendors with the likes of Google and such for Chromebook authentication and encryption. In addition to that, we integrate with all the social media companies, any OAuth or SAML implementations. We can integrate with those product sets as well.
Is Cloudpath agnostic to wired vendors?
Yes, so Cloudpath is completely agnostic to wired and wireless. So in fact, we position this as a unified access. So where you can take a device and plug it into the wire or connect to the wireless network, the end user will get same policies attached to that device. So it is completely agnostic to wired or wireless vendors.
Why is this product so popular in education?
That's a good question. There are a couple of reasons for that. One is, of course, the positioning of the product was primarily in education to begin with, and in addition to that, education is the only vertical outside of enterprise where we see a large swath of devices. So a typical large educational university or organization, even K-12 for that matter, has tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of users on the network. So there are large user populations, but not enough IT staff to manage that. Compared to an enterprise, like Ruckus, or even larger enterprises like corporate space offices, you will see thousands of users, but those thousands of users are always serviced with large number of IT personnel. In case of these educational institutions, we have large number of users with very less IT staff, so they're very thinly staffed, which is where they need a lot of help to onboard, configure, and manage and maintain these devices, which is where Cloudpath comes into picture.
Wow, we still have a lot more questions. Our customers like to do POCs and test it with firewall integrations. How can I proceed in this case?
Yeah, so please talk to your local SE. Your local SE should be able to help you with those integrations. Your local SE has access to Cloudpath resources back in HQ, so if they don't have answers to some of the questions, or if they need help, they know who to reach out for in HQ, so they have a team behind them. So please work with your local SE to get those addressed.
One last question. I don't quite understand what the question is. He said, one doubt, Cisco ISE and Aruba ClearPath work with an agent installation inside BYOD devices. Do you have BYOD devices?
Yeah, so I think the question is both Cisco and Aruba have agents to configure devices. Do we have? If that is the question, yes, Cloudpath has an agent as well, which helps in configuring the devices. Again, this depends on the operating system too. And this is true for Cisco, Aruba, and any other vendor, because we are at the mercy of operating systems. So iOS devices typically have mobile configs, so we use the mobile config to configure the devices. For Android, Windows, Mac, we do have agents where the agent takes care of configuring the device and also moving the device from one network to the other and such. So in addition to that, these agents also perform the device posture check and remediation, so checking whether the firewall is on or checking a particular setting on the operating system and changing that. So yes, so those operating systems, we do have agents.
Okay, that was the last question, so we'll wrap up the live portion. So thank you for Vern and Avi for presenting all that information. We'll stay online for a couple more minutes in case you do have questions, and we'll just answer them online. Quick reminder that the slide deck and the recording will be emailed to you in a couple of days, and to check out the partner portal for more information and all of the resources that they mentioned in this presentation. So have a great day.